The story begins in a time long ago, in a remote village where the boundaries between the human world and the whispering jungle were thin. At the heart of this village lived a young woman named Siti, known by everyone for her gentle spirit and hair that shone like a raven's wing. She had recently married her childhood sweetheart, and soon the village rejoiced at the news that she was carrying a child. For months, the village was filled with the sounds of preparations. Elderly women weaving small cradles from rattan, and Siti singing soft lullabies to her growing belly as she sat beneath the shade of the large banana trees that bordered her home. As the moon reached its fullest phase during the hottest month of the year, Siti went into labor. The night was unnaturally still. Not a single cricket chirped, and the wind seemed to hold its breath. Inside her small wooden hut, lit only by the flickering orange glow of oil lamps, the atmosphere turned heavy. Hours bled into one another as the village midwife struggled to help, but something was wrong. The air in the room grew icy cold, despite the tropical heat outside. It is said that a shadow drifted across the moon at the very moment Siti's heart gave out, her final breath spent in a silent plea for the child she would never hold. In the traditions of the old world, a death during childbirth is considered the most unnatural of ends, leaving behind a soul filled with a specific, jagged kind of unfinished business. Because Siti died with the intense, agonizing desire to be a mother and the sudden shock of a life stolen, her spirit did not ascend. Instead, it curdled. As her body was prepared for burial in the damp earth, a heavy scent of frangipani, the flower of the dead, began to bloom spontaneously in the middle of the night, even though no such trees were nearby. The transformation took place in the deep shadows of the cemetery. The grief that should have been peaceful turned into a sharp, cold rage. The legend says that on the third night after her burial, the earth above her grave cracked open. It wasn't the sweet, living Siti who emerged, but the first Pontianak. She rose from the soil not with a cry of pain, but with a high-pitched, melodic laugh that drifted over the rice fields and into the windows of the sleeping villagers. Her white burial shroud had lengthened into a flowing gown that never touched the mud, and her fingernails had hardened into yellowed, bone-like claws. She did not head for the heavens. She headed for the dark, leafy canopy of the banana groves. There, she perched among the broad leaves, her long hair masking the hole in her back where her life force had leaked away. She began to wait, watching the village lights flicker out one by one. She was no longer a daughter or a wife. She was a creature of the night, a guardian of the threshold between life and death, driven by a hunger to take from the living the happiness that the fates had denied her. This was the birth of the legend, a tragedy that transformed a mother's love into the most feared haunting in history. One true encounter happened. In the late 1990s, a construction crew working near the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur reported an incident that remains a staple of local urban legends. The men were clearing a patch of forest near an old rubber plantation to make way for a new housing development when several workers refused to return to the site after the sun went down. One evening, a site supervisor stayed back to finish some paperwork in a portable cabin. Around 11 p.m., he noticed a sudden, heavy scent of frangipani flowers, a fragrance so thick it felt suffocating. Moments later, he heard a sound like cloth tearing, followed by a high-pitched, melodic humming coming from the top of a nearby tree. When he stepped outside with a flashlight, he caught a glimpse of something white moving through the canopy. It wasn't a bird, it moved with a heavy, swinging motion. As the light hit the branches, the humming stopped instantly, replaced by a deep, guttural growl that sounded vibrational.
The supervisor didn't wait to see more. He locked himself in the cabin until dawn. The next morning, the crew found deep vertical gouges in the wooden siding of the cabin, roughly 7 feet off the ground.
In many rural communities, a sudden change in the atmosphere serves as the first warning that something has crossed over from the shadows. These indicators are often sensory, beginning with a heavy, floral fragrance, specifically frangipani or jasmine, that seems to appear out of nowhere in the middle of the night. This sweetness is deceptive. It almost always gives way to a sharp, nauseating scent of decay as the distance between the observer and the source closes. Sound also behaves strangely in these moments. A high-pitched melodic laughter or the sound of a weeping infant is frequently reported. According to local belief, the volume of these sounds is inverted. If the crying is faint, the presence is standing right behind you. But if it is piercingly loud, the entity is actually far off in the distance. The natural world often reacts before humans do. In the dense heat of the tropics, a sudden, total silence from insects and birds is a primary signal of a nearby predator. Dogs may refuse to bark, instead letting out a long, mournful, crying howl that signals they are seeing something invisible to the human eye. To avoid attracting this attention, specific traditions are still practiced. Whistling after dark is strictly avoided, as it is seen as an invitation. Additionally, leaving laundry outside overnight is considered a risk, as the scent of the living on the fabric is thought to act as a beacon. Historically, even the founding of major cities involved firing cannons into the brush to drive away these lingering spirits before any structures could be safely built. The entity is traditionally described as a master of dualities, shifting between a deceptive beauty and a predatory nightmare. In the first instance, she typically presents as a graceful woman dressed in a long, flowing white gown, reminiscent of a traditional burial shroud. Her most striking feature is her hair, which is unnaturally long, dark, and thick, often serving to mask her face or a hollow space at the nape of her neck. When the deception is no longer necessary, her physical form takes on a much more malevolent quality. Her skin is described as being the color of ash or pale marble, and her eyes may glow with a piercing red light. The hands, which might have seemed delicate moments before, reveal elongated, razor-sharp claws. These talons are her primary means of attack, as folklore often focuses on her tendency to strike at the midsection of her victims. Even though cities are modern now, many people still follow old rules, like not whistling in the dark or leaving clothes outside at night, because they respect the mystery of this tale. It remains one of the most famous ghost stories because it reminds everyone to be careful when they are alone in the shadows.